So how are we starting this? Am I now moderating? Okay, great. So Portopia, that may or may not resonate with folks. I think what I can speak for McKibben and myself, I'm sure this is true for the rest of you, that social impact is a large and growing movement within the blockchain crypto world. I think that with our conversations in partnership with the Startup Society Foundation, Digital Raign has been the impact partner for this summit. The Impact Accelerator we did yesterday was part of that. One of the key outcomes from this gathering is to put together a consortium of organizations and projects for Puerto Rico, so demonstration projects on the ground as well as technology projects. So there's a hackathon happening May 11th down in Puerto Rico that's looking at a lot of the emerging tech from VR to big data, AI, blockchain. So we're also interested in the integration of both the built environment, or kind of Maslow's base of the pyramid, from shelter, food, water, energy, connectivity, and how some of the emerging and exponential technologies can integrate across those and theoretically be one of the, I was going to say bullets in the chamber, but what's true is that we can help solve the SDGs in a location like Puerto Rico, and have that be the house on the hill for what's possible in the rest of the world. So I will, again, I didn't do it. My name's James Hanusa. I'm with Digital Raign. I'm also with UIX Global. And I'll let all the other panelists introduce themselves and their affiliations, maybe to start there.
Sure. My name is John Wise. I'm the CEO of Loci. I'm also the co-founder of the Digital Asset Trade Association, steering committee for that, the founder of the Top Tier Affiliate Group, limited partner at a couple of hedge funds, an investor myself in blockchain cryptocurrency, as well as one of the co-founders of Crypto House, which is going on next week, by the way, in New York City. And also a subject matter expert for several, if not maybe even most, of the securities and financial-based regulators in this city. Yeah.
My turn?
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. My name is Philip Saunders. I'm co-founder and CTO of Nuhanse Network. So Nuhanse is a company we co-founded with Joe McKinney, who's also CEO of Startup Society's Foundation. And basically what we focus on is e-governance protocols, in particular for zone projects and the zone industry. So one of the things I wanted to talk about that's pretty relevant to Puerto Rico is a project we've been working on with New Way Capital. It's called the Zone Protocol. And basically the Zone Protocol, it's kind of a DNS-like property registry system. It exists on the level of zones, and we're looking at opportunities that we can basically work with zone operators at a local level to basically implement a property registry system, because it's very important. And actually, if you look at different countries, one of the problems that a lot of jurisdictions have had is basically not having secure records, and that can slow economic growth. It can cause a lot of problems, things like land grabs and so on and so forth, that basically people who don't have secure digital property rights are basically have all these problems. So basically my background, I'm an Ethereum developer. I've been in the space for about 3 years. Come from a sort of a libertarian kind of background, but I'm very interested in how technology can basically make people's lives better, can increase wealth, can increase prosperity. So I'm very happy to talk today.
I'm deeply hopeful that I can steal you at some point over the next day or so for a conversation, because I want to talk about all of that kind of stuff with you, if you're cool with that. Maybe a cup of coffee or something. Hello, everyone. Well, no, you did a really good job sort of like putting in super concise language some stuff that I'm pretty passionate about.
You can't turn down this meeting now.
No, in front of everybody, dude. It's on now. Sorry about that. Hello, my name is Natalie Mitchell. I am the Director of Growth and Branding, also Talent Acquisition and Operations. It's a many hats thing at LBRY, LBRY, which is basically to way oversimplify a decentralized YouTube. So YouTube on the blockchain. So very cool stuff going on there. Also co-founder and driving the operations and talent mission at a very similar but moving in a very different direction blockchain startup that's still kind of in stealth mode, but that I hope to be able to bullhorn quite a bit about as we are wrapping up our first round of funding. Woo-hoo. And happy about that. And basically have spent my career moving missions forward, hiring good people, making sure that talent management is a key priority. I have been involved in the blockchain space as an enthusiast and someone who wanted to sort of professionally become more involved for many years, but only in the last few years have been able to actually to sink my teeth into some projects from that talent acquisition and talent management standpoint, building more agile teams and helping to turn ideas into missions that are actually moving forward. I am deeply passionate about taking blockchain technology into emerging nations, emerging centers and areas of innovation, and supporting the bright minds that exist in those places with the kind of infrastructure and sort of technological playing field levelers that this gentleman was just speaking about. So that's definitely something that I spend a lot of my time talking about and operating with other movers and shakers to collect information and gather peoples about. I've spent a lot of my time more recently working with young professionals, people in colleges, mostly on the Eastern Seaboard, who are going through the first blockchain coursework, being designed specifically to help future business leaders to, get a sense for this space and where they fit in it, which is going to be, I think, really exciting for the fact that, and I'll end here, my deepest passion at this point in time is bringing better culture and better organizational strategies and talent strategies to the blockchain space, as I think that there is much to be desired there. Come on, like more reaction than that, right?
You got a thumbs up over here, for sure.
Like, can we be ready for that? I am so ready for that. But yeah, just helping people with programmer brains learn how to coexist with people with business brains so that everybody can do better and more faster. So that is what I'm hoping to bring to this conversation. Thank you for having me, too.
Matt McKibben. I've been in the blockchain industry for 5-6 years now. Did the DC blockchain meetup. I'm on the board of the Startup Societies Foundation. Buildcoin is one of my clients. Impact PPA. I'm Loki is one of my clients. So we do mostly focus on Decentranet is the company. My company now currently focus mostly on impact blockchain projects. So solving the world's greatest challenges using blockchain technology. Whether the sustainability goals are obviously areas that we want to focus on, but healthcare and energy and financial inclusion and education are the biggest ones. So looking at tokenization models and impact models to allow the crowd to invest to help solve these problems.
So can I get just a time check so we can monitor and make sure this is how much longer do we have? Or 15, 20 minutes from now? Great, okay. 2:30. Okay, let's start here. What are the challenges, culture, we'll touch on that separately, but challenges and what can you contribute from an impact perspective to Puerto Rico now?
Culture problems?
We're going to talk about culture separately.
Okay.
So this is more just what do you see as the structural challenges and or what can you contribute to this consortium, to Puerto Rico, in the next.
Well, one of the big things, and I think touching on his point here as well, is the classification of ownership rights of things all over the place, right? Whether it's property, whether it's assets, whether it's intellectual property. If there isn't really some sort of immutable source of ownership rights, then people can't really count on those things as being a nest egg. And on top of that, it can be sort of strong end, right? It can be stolen, it can be taken, whether it be by enterprises or by corruption, anything along those lines. On top of that, it also really hurts debt vehicles and debt opportunities from international money coming in, because there isn't really a good understanding of the assets and values that they have. Now, I know that's really an investment banker's sort of mentality on the whole thing, and from an altruistic sense, let's make sure that we can protect those that have things, right? That they can count on those things being there when they go away, when, you know, if they need to pass it on to their young whatever, or their family if they passed away. Further than that, it also helps to organize and limit a lot of the corruption within government, within some of these humanitarian funds, or any of that, right? We can really dramatically improve fundraising vehicles, we can dramatically improve debt vehicles, we can get organized in a lot of ways. So the first aspect is organization. The second aspect is building, multiplying, and improving the value of these assets as a whole, right? The last is really how to define efficiency and expansion from there. We need to make sustainable economic growth. We need to continue sustainable economic growth. It's not just about rebuilding, it's about rebuilding with the right blocks that aren't going to go anywhere, right? It's making it so that all of this stuff can last, which is, I think, really why blockchain and everything that we're doing here in this room is so important, is the audit opportunity, but also the immutability of so much of this, right? Let's start by defining what is, expand on that with ideas, both altruistic as well as economic, and grow.
So I think blockchain-based property registries are pretty much better wherever they're implemented compared to paper-based systems. But I think in particular for a place like Puerto Rico, you can have the additional benefit that you can do things like tokenize ownership. So you can have a property right that that basically represents the whole zone. That can be subdivided. That can, you can delegate property rights to people who are living within the zone. But essentially, what you can do is split ownership of the zone among a lot of different stakeholders, and one of those could be local governments, local population. So there's this kind of perception that, in talking about the cultural angle, that basically a lot of this seems very top down, and people sort of coming in from the top to kind of help Puerto Rico and so on. But I think one of the ways to prevent that is to basically give people a stake in their own community. And Mark Fraser's talked about things like community land trusts. One of the things that I'm keeping in mind when I'm designing the zone protocol is that basically we can implement things like community land trusts through a smart contract. You can have a token that represents like a digital title with a kind of a deed file, and then you can associate that with another token that represents sort of sub-ownership of that. So we'll in the future, in the next couple of months, we'll be building tools, open source tools, platforms that can basically be adopted by anyone in their local jurisdiction. They can set up a zone, and they can basically administer their property rights. But yeah, I think that's the most direct way to, I suppose, help people is to give them a stake in their own community, and you can do that with sort of, literally giving people ownership. So yeah.
So that's really interesting. What I hear out of that is this is actually a vehicle not only to improve the taxation aspect of property of anything, right? But at the same time, it actually is basically a socialistic economic structure without any of the politics involved, right? That's kind of an interesting concept here, to do an economic socialism or even communism there without any of the really terrible political ramifications that come from that, right? There's real immutability and transparency that can happen with that.
That wasn't quite what I intended to.
No.
And
I think a lot of people misconstrue or misunderstand, right? The real problems with things like socialism and communism isn't necessarily that it wasn't an altruistic intention, right? It's that the execution is really, really horrible, and you end up getting this dictator that's at the top that ends up being able to manipulate the whole thing.
the way from an economic system or perspective that it works is actually fairly efficient and actually quite clean, but the rest of it just goes to shit really quick.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, I think you can do things like implement land leases. And yeah, so you can have things like where, you know, within a zone you can parcel the land into, and this is very similar to the Hong Kong model, like where you, and you can manage those payments, you know, through the blockchain. And yeah, you can implement commons, you can implement, you know, public revenue that way. I mean, it actually might be an interesting opportunity to implement something like George's and, you know, land value taxes. That's sort of more what I had in mind. So land value taxes, that's a kind of a model of public revenue where basically, you know, you pay a sort of a ground rent on the land. So you could implement something like that in the zone protocol. And actually, one of the problems a lot of people have identified is that, you know, what if the world shifted over to use cryptocurrencies instead of fiat currencies? And well, the most obvious problem is, well, how do you tax everybody? You know, because obviously people use US dollars so they can pay taxes, you know. And the reality is, I mean, either you can try and tell everybody to use this system or that system, but the alternate way is to move away from a system of taxing transactions and trying to sort of control everybody's, you know, have oversight of everybody's transactions, and then sort of move to a system where it's more based on something like a land value tax, you know, because land is like a permanent thing, it's not. So in that sense, you can just let people use whatever currency they want, and you can get most of, like 90% of public revenue from ground rents. So.
Do you guys want to talk about challenges and what you can contribute from the impact perspective for Puerto Rico?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so again, you know, coming from my background, and I will say that I think the real problem with socialism or communism, some of these other things, is actually the incentives get all messed up, right? One of, I think, actually the coolest things about blockchain technology is that you can really create mini, or I think probably even larger scale ecosystems around different areas or ideas or, you know, certain, you know, functions that you're trying to perform either in a community or in an app or whatever. You can create ecosystems where everyone's incentives can be really pure, and like you can have something that actually doesn't, you know, involve a lot of middlemen or people taking haircuts on, you know, what should belong to them or like whatever the case may be. Like it really is something you can sort of set up like really purely driven incentives. So I think that's actually the coolest thing for me. But, you know, I come at this definitely looking at it from a talent standpoint for sure. And I think that, you know, as far as a project that seeks to be as like cohesive and sort of like, as large with as many moving parts as the one that we're talking about here, it can't be overlooked that we are swimming in good ideas. And, you know, I go to presentations and I see a lot of decks that have, you know, very impressive people coming from very impressive companies. And I just know that none of those people are actually managing day-to-day operations of a single damn thing. And so when I see those presentations, I always ask myself, who's recruiting people? Who are the people who are being recruited? And how is it possible, because I've been recruiting in this space, that they're finding the people that they need, especially when it comes to the kind of technology that we're talking about, to build this stuff and like actually iterate over and over and over again and come up with the good solutions and make the things like these big lofty ideas that we're talking about actually like happen and make them like actually work. Like who's doing all of this work? Because I've been trying to find these people, and it can be tough to try to find these people. Like literally can't find these people when I really, really need to. So it's like I see all of these big ideas and my mind automatically goes to the tactile. Like I want to know like who are the people not up here with like glittering smiles and like really, really fancy resumes. Who are the people like here who are like, hey guys, we have stuff to do, and then who are the guys who are like implementing? You know what I mean? Because there's definitely a lack of architecture, I find, in the blockchain space. There's a lack of people who really, really know what it is that they're doing, and I think that there has to be a greater understanding for the fact that like we really are building in spaces where like people have never gone before. We're building stuff that's never been built before. We're you know, solving problems that, you know, are like really intensely important for us to solve if we want people who are not programmers actually, you know, utilizing this technology in like real life scenarios. You know, like seriously, can we like figure out a light wallet that's like reliable in a browser? Somebody, anybody, nobody? I didn't think so. So like that's the kind of you know, place where my brain goes, and I think that there has to be a really strong effort to try and like go out and find these people and you know, get them on board with projects like this, because unfortunately, if you look at the people who are filing patents all day long, a million miles per minute, it's really, really super huge corporate entities. And so I always sort of look at the landscape sleep and I wonder, all right, where are these people and how do I convince them to use their powers for good? Because there is a lot of money sort of leaning in the other direction. So I think that having a really healthy understanding for the fact that like ideas are really great, but that like really strong real world implementation of these strategies and making sure that the right teams are in place is like paramount to actually getting anything done.
Okay, so I'm just going to just give us all this clarity. We've got about less than 10 minutes left and maybe 2 more questions, or we'll see what fits. I don't want to, pull the reins. I just want to say, like,
Okay.
let's
I'm easy.
make it tight, baby.
So I'll make it tight. So what I'm already doing for Puerto Rico is, and a lot of my clients actually have practical applications in building, energy systems or infrastructure, making it transparent in Puerto Rico. So directing them to the people that are attempting to rebuild a lot of these systems down in Puerto Rico is what I have been doing. We were in the first Restart Week Puerto Rico there for Blockchain Unbound, and just kind of making connections with the people that are attempting to help rebuild these from the governmental side, but also from the crypto community side that's found Puerto Rico to be a very nice tax incentive to go move down there, and we'll see if that works out. The challenge is, I think the biggest challenge is actually getting the Puerto Rican people to be involved in that process. It can't be, and you've heard this probably several times today, it can't be a bunch of people moving down there saying, hey, this is the way it's going to be. We're going to, be crypto rich down in Puerto Rico. It's got to come from local leaders that want to help rebuild their communities on the best technologies in different areas. And so the learning curve of getting those humans onboarded, and just using the tools, as she mentioned, the tools for the most part on a mass consumer side don't exist to allow for people to do what we want them to do in the future, be your own bank with your cell phone and your hardware wallet. Those things are still technologically challenging even for a lot of people, and the mass consumer doesn't know how to use it and could potentially lose all of their whatever tokens they have, even if they were given them, airdropped them overnight.
So from our perspective, we're really interested in building out transformation strategies for island nations, for other places in need. And we hope that the consortium that comes out of here, we've got good momentum. We explored 20 different projects from different organizations yesterday after just probably a week or less of reaching out to organizations. And we hope there's others that come on board before we leave here tomorrow. Goal is about 40 projects and organizations to be involved in the consortium. And we're really looking at governance around how that many organizations and projects can be brought together for governance. And then we're looking at what's the right funding vehicle to bring the right amount of capital to those projects. So we're about 5 minutes now, 2 questions left. Culture is a problem. You brought it up. It's something that McKibben and I have talked about a lot within this industry, kind of some of the early, whatever. How can we, in short answers, how can we encourage, model, bring a culture of social impact to the blockchain crypto space, the new city, smart cities space? How do you think, at Digital Raign, we've looked at Burning Man and the Esalen Institute as 2 of our kind of foundational influences culturally on the tribe, the community that we're building. But I'm curious if there's some other organizations that, could inspire this community going forward towards social impact. Best practices.
So best practices. Doing events like this, talking about it, getting impact investors involved in the new technologies and explaining what they are and how they work, I think is one of the biggest things. There's a really big learning curve for this whole industry, and the tools aren't mature and kind of said. So the best practices is to continue to do 4 blockchain conferences every week and get the newbies involved as much as possible and publish it. And eventually the infrastructures will be built. And then, I mean, the Caribbean nations in general that were destroyed in the hurricane, you know, those governments, from what I've been hearing, are very, very interested in saying, all right, we want to rebuild. How do we do it the best? Like, you know, let's write the regulations the best for the people that want to come in and invest. Let's write, you know, the regulations and the infrastructure things. What are the best systems currently? You tell us. We're open to you new millennial crypto people that want to create these systems. And so the experimentation of the different ones and which one systems they build, I think, is the best practice at this point, is to be engaging with the policymakers, engaging with the governments that are open and liberal to these ideas, as well as kind of, you know, potentially zoning out the special economic zone, Apple zone, you know, as much regulatory permission that you can have in terms of writing your own regulations. And then the impact portion, I just think that I think that if you're investing in blockchain technologies, you're either investing in like the protocol infrastructure level at this point, because there's still not enough of those tools out there, or you're investing in something that has a real world impact, like, so for example, Impact PPA, I use as one of our clients, Dan Bates, you know, with their token model, they're building out energy systems all over the world that are microgrids, that when you invest in the token or purchase the token, you are getting a kind of a share of that and helping more projects get built. So that has a real world impact. Financial inclusion projects as well that are all going on the ground and allowing people to, for the first time, interact with the currency and system. And so, you know, there's what, 3 to 4 billion people on the planet that still don't have financial systems. There's billions more that don't have land registries. There's a lot of work to be done. Right?
Well,
So again, we're getting short on time, but.
I would just, if I could add one thing.
You care about this, yeah, please.
No, I care about this a lot. So I spend a lot of time in schools. I spend a lot of time, I mean, most recently, I would say I'm most hyped for Babson College. There's building out really like the first in the nation, I believe, entire curriculum pointed towards people who are, you know, they would have been investment bankers. I mean, a lot of these kids are like, you know, they've got like an econ CS, you know, concentration, and they're taking it into blockchain. Like they're, for the first time, we have kids that we're going to be churning out with degrees that actually make them, like, you know, sort of, you know, primed for this space. And when I go to places like that, when I go to Harvard, when I go to Tufts University, you know, even over, you know, in some of the schools on the Eastern Seaboard, they've got really strong accelerator programs and incubators attached to them, like UNH and places like that. Like, for every guy that was going to be an investment banker, I'm meeting 2 kids who are like, I want to get into crypto, but like for real, like business, not just like, you know, my stash that I'm keeping track of. Like, how do I do that? For every person who was going to be a zoologist, I'm talking to, you know, a young person who is deeply interested, had absolutely no idea that this technology was more than just like the hype that you see in the news on Bitcoin. So I think that there is something to be said for, you know, the idea that this space actually exists and that it has more to do with like a lot of things other than just like, you know, people getting crypto rich or whatever, that there are like real world applications that if you were going to go into a more traditional landscape, if you wanted to go out and do good in the world, if you were the kind of kid who was going to graduate with a degree in whatever and go in, you know, to some, you know, NGO or, you know, work in the nonprofit sector or whatever to be out in the world trying to solve these problems. Like, we got to make sure that these kids know that this exists and that these technologies are going to emerge and turn into, at some point, whatever the actual future tech is going to be in these spaces, and that if they want to get in on this and be a part of this, that there's a lot more than just like cryptocurrency going on here, that there are applications that, you know, give them maybe better tools moving forward. So I would say, if you have an organization, you're working in this space, contact schools, figure out who is trying to figure out how to get into this, you know, space and educate, you know, these young people. Get an internship program together and go and apply to be, you know, sort of recognized by these schools as a corporation, or not a corporation, but an entity of some kind, whatever you call yourselves. You know, let them know, hey, we want smart young people. These kids are smart as tacks. They absolutely know what's going on. And if they don't go to your organization, they're going to go to some big old corporation in Boston or New York or wherever, and they're going to do their rounds there, and they're going to learn that system. So if we want to be a part of helping to sort of like transition, get into this new space, reach out to young people. These professors want you to do that. Talk to them. Make sure you you make yourself available. At LBRY, I am working on a case study right now with Babson, and they asked us for help in building their curriculum. What does it mean to be a business person in blockchain? Hello, awesome opportunity. We're shaping the future, right? It's so cool. So I would say get an internship program together, figure out how you can make use of these incredibly brilliant kids who have a lot of great ideas and are very innovative thinkers, and then put them to work. This is how we spread that, for sure.
So we're officially over.
So cheap.
I'm gonna do two things, and maybe this is a question that's just a shout out, or if we have time to answer it. I want to do a double shot quote of Bucky Fuller. I think you never change things by fighting the existing reality. Change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. I think we need to throw a better party and just show people, what it can be like to bring values and true community together to do something together collaboratively. The next one is kind of around this last question that I want to ask all of us is. Bucky talked about making the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or the disadvantage to anyone. And I had this idea that, maybe humanity needs a moonshot. Musk has, said we're going to Mars by 2024. Could we say, collectively in Puerto Rico that we're going to try to do what the UN has said, is possible by 2030 to achieve all 17 SDGs. Could we do it in a place like Puerto Rico for 3 million people by 2020? Something outrageous, a moonshot. And if so, how would we do that together?
It's totally doable.
That's 2 years, though.
Explaining how is going to get
Yeah.
way over our time, but I think it's totally doable.
I need a project manager.
Existing financial systems are already broken. There's nothing that any of us are surprised about, hearing a statement like that. They've all been asking for this, right? Both from the institutional side, the enterprise side, the regulatory side, and the cryptocurrency community. And frankly, anybody, and any individual has all been asking for exactly this. It's too long to explain, but yes, I think it's totally feasible. Difficult, but feasible.
Maybe we can take that conversation forward. I want to be respectful for the program length and everything else. So maybe we end it there unless there's a thought, a word, something short.
I would just say that the 2020 thing in Puerto Rico is that's not going to happen. But just because the scale of unless you had a centralized organization which was going to lay out a plan and everyone was going to follow the plan, like SpaceX, which is not a decentralized organization. There are people that make decisions, and so in Puerto Rico, the communities are going to be able to build some of these systems together, and I think that they will make progress. But to have all of those types of things done in 1.5 to 2 years is not thing. But I think that we are going to see those types of systems from the ground up in local communities be built over the next 10 years, and I think that it is possible to collectively direct resources at models that fit to solve them by 2030.
Nobody says it has to be a decentralized organization, right? We say that it has to align the incentives and we have to solve the problem. That's doable. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have to come up with an entirely new system to fix something that's existing or that isn't getting done right. Sure, we should go towards a decentralized organization
Eventually.
But at least let's decentralize valuation or decentralize the incentives and make it a mutually aligned incentives thing.
Yeah.
Let's fix the problem first and foremost and set it up so that there can be fallbacks and that there can be ways to make it work long term.
I actually agree with that point because I won't be too long, but basically on this point of culture, and I can't really speak to culture too much, but I think one mindset or one heuristic you can have is that you can build tools and you can aim to have people adopt those tools locally and have control over their own their own segment of the database. So instead of building a kind of a one-size-fits-all system, it may well be decentralized, but it's still a one-size-fits-all system, and you can't really, there's not much flexibility about sort of upgrading the features. One of the advantages of centralized systems is that you actually can have someone to make decisions. You can have developers who can constantly update and iterate and improve. that's very hard to do. Once you deploy a smart contract, you can't change it. It's there forever. It's there permanently. So I think one of the kind of the inspirations that I have is looking at the DNS system. The great thing about the DNS system is you have a kind of this sort of combination of kind of local sovereignty and kind of global accessibility. You know, top-level domain registrars, they can sort of control the process of registering a domain. They can, you know, different country codes can have, you know, different rules. Maybe you have to have a registered business or identity. But, you know, once a name is registered, it can be accessed from anywhere. So I think to have the same approach to property registry is a good approach, which is that basically you can have this sort of kind of zone-based approach where local zones sort of own their own registry. They have control over the process of you know, of registration, verification, and so on. You know, they can have their own governance portal. They can have their own sort of databases and so on. A bit like name servers, but once you're on the zone protocol, once you're in the system, you can trade globally. You can access it globally. So I think that's a much better approach. That I think it solves a lot of these sort of culture problems where people think there's a kind of a top-down approach, and it sort of gives a sort of an element of local sovereignty combined with the kind of the global interoperability that we enjoy about the idea about the blockchain. So, yeah.
And with that, we're going to thank our panelists. Please, guys, man. Appreciate that. And with that,